Every Halloween, the outside world turns to fantasy, masks, laughter, and candy-coated fear. But inside the walls of America's most notorious prisons, the night takes on a much darker meaning. There are no pumpkins, no parties, only silence. And yet, guards whisper that when the lights go out, the walls remember. They say you can hear footsteps from cell blocks sealed for decades, or see shadows walking past security cameras long after every inmate is locked in. Halloween, in here, isn't a holiday. It's an anniversary of everything this place refuses to forget. At Redwood State Penitentiary in California, the line between rumor and reality has always been thin. Built in 1921 and shut down twice after unexplained inmate deaths, the prison reopened in the late 90s, just in time for a tragedy that would cement its legend. Since then, each October brings a familiar dread among staff and inmates alike. They call it Dead Man's Night. No one can explain it, but every Halloween, something stirs in the East Wing. Doors open on their own. Lights flicker in patterns that spell names on the floor. And every few years, someone new swears they've seen the man in the orange jumpsuit, the one who never left. If you dare step deeper into the darkness, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. You'll need it. The story begins deep in the heart of Redwood State Penitentiary, a maximum security prison buried in the fog-drenched hills of Northern California. The place was built on the ashes of an older facility, one destroyed by fire nearly a century ago. Locals say the fire wasn't accidental, it was punishment. They whisper that 32 inmates burned alive that night, locked in their cells while the warden saved only his staff. The state rebuilt the prison on the same ground, stone by stone, as if trying to bury the guilt beneath concrete. But guilt doesn't die that easily. Every October, the atmosphere inside Redwood changes. The inmates grow restless. Guards trade shifts like soldiers avoiding a cursed battlefield. Even the security systems begin to glitch. Cameras flicker, alarms trip for no reason, and the control room fills with static, always around the same hour, 3:13 a.m. It's become a superstition among officers. If you're awake at that time on Halloween night, you don't look at the monitors. In 2019, a small team of prison documentarians from Los Angeles was granted permission to film inside Redwood for a Halloween special. Their goal was to explore urban legends of incarceration, focusing on stories told by inmates and guards over the years. The crew consisted of 3 people: Evan Cross, a seasoned crime journalist, Mara Lynn, the team's camerawoman, and Darius Holt, a sound engineer who'd once worked as a correctional officer himself. They thought they were making another sensational Halloween special, dark, edgy, and forgettable. They had no idea what they were walking into. From the first night, they noticed things that didn't make sense. Their recording equipment kept malfunctioning, batteries drained within minutes, and microphones picked up faint breathing in empty hallways. When Evan reviewed the footage later that evening, he found something odd, a reflection in the glass of a sealed isolation cell. It looked like a man's face, staring directly into the camera. But when they checked the logs, that section of the prison hadn't housed an inmate in over 20 years. The prison warden, Harold Dunn, dismissed their concerns. "Old wiring," he said, lighting a cigarette. "You'll hear stories here. Every prison has its ghosts." But even his voice trembled when they mentioned cell block E. "We don't open that wing," he muttered. "Not anymore." According to the records, cell block E was closed after the death of inmate number 1423, known only as Miles Carter. Official reports say he died in a fight, stabbed by another prisoner during a riot. But old staff accounts tell a different story. Carter was a quiet man, serving life for armed robbery and assault. He wasn't violent, at least not until that night. They say he changed suddenly, as if something inside him snapped. Before dawn, 6 inmates were dead. The autopsy described the injuries as unexplainable, the wounds unnatural. When they found Carter, he was sitting calmly in his cell, whispering something over and over. He said he'd let me go when the candles go out. No one knew what he meant. By midnight, Evan insisted they visit Block E despite the warden's warning. "We're here to show the truth," he told his crew. "If we fake fear, we're no better than ghost hunters." The key to the block hadn't been used in years, and when Dunn finally agreed to open it, the heavy metal door groaned like it was waking from a nightmare. Inside, the air was colder, unnaturally so. Their breath turned white as frost crept along the walls. The cells stood empty, doors rusted shut. And yet, as they walked deeper, Mara's camera caught flickers of movement, faint, gray shapes passing behind the bars. She thought it was lens flare until the shape stopped and turned toward her. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Evan froze. "Yeah, don't move." They played back the footage in real time. Nothing there. But on slow motion, the figure appeared again, just behind Evan. It wasn't one of the crew. It wasn't a guard. The shape seemed to be wearing an old prison uniform. The number faint but visible, 1423. The power flickered. The lights dimmed to red emergency glow. Then came the sound, metal scraping on concrete, like chains being dragged. The crew bolted, stumbling through the narrow hall until they burst into the main corridor, gasping for breath. Darius dropped the sound recorder, but it kept running. Later, when they replayed it, they heard a voice whisper, "Don't lock me in again." No one spoke for the rest of the night. The warden refused to discuss what happened, and the team was asked to leave the next morning. Officially, their footage was never aired. Unofficially, one copy survived, leaked online a year later. In the final seconds of the tape, just before it cuts to static, the camera pans down the dark hallway of cell block E. For a brief, almost imperceptible moment, you can see a figure standing at the far end. His face is pale, his eyes hollow. And on the wall behind him, written in ash, are the words, "Halloween never ends here." By the time the footage leaked online, it had already become an internet sensation, the Redwood tape. Millions watched, debated, and dissected every frame. Most called it a hoax. But for those who knew the real history of Redwood State Penitentiary, it was a warning. 2 years later, in the fall of 2021, a new investigative team decided to return to Redwood. This time, they weren't thrill seekers. They were professionals. Dr. Lena Morris, a criminal psychologist specializing in inmate trauma. Ryan Cole, a documentary filmmaker obsessed with unexplained cases. And Officer David Reyes, a former correctional officer who had served at Redwood before its East Wing was permanently sealed. Their goal wasn't entertainment. It was to uncover the truth behind the Carter incident, and to prove, once and for all, that the stories about Dead Man's Night were just that, stories. The state had long since decommissioned Redwood, turning it into a restricted historical site. No guards, no inmates, just the skeleton of a prison that once held thousands of men, and, according to some, something else. As the crew arrived on the last week of October, thick fog blanketed the grounds. The main gate creaked open as if the building itself was expecting them. Inside, the silence was oppressive. Their flashlights swept across cell doors, graffiti, and layers of dust thick enough to hide footprints. But as they reached Block E, something strange appeared on the floor, a single, wet footprint. Bare. Fresh. Ryan brushed it off. Condensation, he muttered, setting up his camera tripod. But when they played back the live feed, Lena noticed something off. The timestamp on the camera kept flickering, jumping forward exactly 1 minute every 10 seconds, as if time itself was glitching. By midnight, the temperature inside Block E dropped nearly 15 degrees. Their equipment picked up low-frequency vibrations, a deep hum that made the air feel heavy. Reyes, visibly shaken, confessed that this was the same sound he heard years ago, the night the prison was evacuated during a Halloween lockdown. "They said it was a power surge," he said. "But I saw the lights form symbols on the wall, like someone was writing." While scanning the cells, Lena found a sealed vent covered in soot. Inside, she discovered a small folded note wrapped in aged linen. The writing was jagged, frantic. "He comes when they forget. He feeds on the forgotten." Suddenly, the lights flickered. A loud metallic clang echoed from the far end of the corridor. One of the cell doors had slammed shut, though none of them had touched it. Ryan sprinted forward, camera rolling, only to stop dead in his tracks. The number etched on the door was faint, but unmistakable, 1423. Reyes muttered a prayer. "That cell shouldn't even exist," he whispered. "It was welded shut years ago." And yet, the lock hung open. Against their better judgment, they stepped inside. The air was thick, humid, like breathing through water. The small window was shattered from the inside, and on the far wall, someone had scratched symbols into the concrete. Circles, crosses, and something that looked like an eye. Beneath it, written in ash, was a phrase. The man who waits behind the mirror. Ryan lifted the camera to capture it and froze. Through his viewfinder, the reflection on the cracked metal sink showed not their own faces, but another man's. Pale, hollow-eyed, wearing a faded orange jumpsuit. The sound recorder spiked to a piercing frequency. Static filled their ears, but buried in the distortion was a voice. Male, broken, whispering words none of them wanted to believe. You shouldn't have come back. The power surged, the lights exploded in a burst of sparks, and the entire prison plunged into darkness. Their emergency lights flickered to life, barely illuminating the narrow hallway as footsteps began echoing behind them. Slow, deliberate, too heavy to be human. Ryan shouted, "Who's there?" but got no response. Only a distant laugh, dry and hollow, reverberating through the corridor. The air grew colder. Frost crept along the bars, covering the walls with crystalline veins. Reyes drew his flashlight toward the sound and froze. A figure stood at the end of the hall. It wasn't moving, just standing, watching. Lena grabbed Ryan's arm. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Carter." The figure tilted its head slowly, unnaturally. Its eyes glowed faintly red in the darkness, and then it stepped forward. One step at a time. Panic erupted. They ran. The door to block E wouldn't open. Ryan slammed it with his shoulder until it finally burst free. They stumbled into the main yard, gasping, the cold night air stinging their lungs. They didn't stop running until they reached the van. Ryan turned to look back, and for a split second, he saw movement in the watchtower. A silhouette, then two glowing eyes, staring down. When they checked their footage later that night at the motel, everything after entering cell 1423 was gone. Corrupted. But the audio remained. At the 27-minute mark, just before the static ends, a whisper can be heard. Faint, but unmistakable. "It's almost Halloween." Lena stared at the screen, trembling. "That voice," she said. "That wasn't Carter." Ryan frowned. "Then who was it?" Her voice cracked as she answered. It sounded like Evan Cross, the journalist from the original documentary, presumed dead after his disappearance in 2019. By dawn, no one had slept. The motel room was silent except for the endless replay of corrupted audio, that whisper looping over and over. "It's almost Halloween." Ryan sat on the floor surrounded by hard drives and battery packs, desperate to recover more of the footage. Lena stared blankly at the flickering motel light, her hands trembling. Reyes sat near the window, chain-smoking, eyes fixed on the van parked outside as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the lights in the motel room flickered. Ryan's laptop froze. For a split second, an image appeared on the screen, the hallway of Block E, filmed from a low angle. Someone, or something, had continued recording after they ran. In the frame, a shadow passed by the camera. Then, faintly, a voice whispered, "You left the door open." Ryan slammed the laptop shut. The room fell dead silent. By morning, the crew made the decision to go back, one final time. Not to film, but to destroy whatever was left inside Redwood. "If that thing is using the recordings to reach us," Lena said, "then ending the loop might be the only way to stop it." They returned to the prison on October 31st, Halloween night. The fog was thicker than before, clinging to the ground like smoke from an invisible fire. The iron gates groaned open as they approached, even though no one had touched them. Inside, the corridors looked different, warped somehow, as though the building had shifted in their absence. The graffiti was gone, the walls cleaner, the dust disturbed. It felt alive. Reyes muttered under his breath, "This place ain't empty anymore." They made their way toward Block E, guided only by the dim beam of Ryan's flashlight. The deeper they went, the more the prison seemed to breathe, faint gusts of cold air exhaling through cracks, carrying whispers that seemed to circle around them. When they reached cell 1423, the door stood wide open. Inside, on the wall, new writing had appeared. Not in ash this time, but in blood-red rust. "Welcome back, Evan." Lena stepped closer. "He's not dead," she whispered. "He never left." The sound recorder began picking up faint murmurs, overlapping voices, like dozens of people speaking at once. The temperature plummeted. Ryan pointed the camera at the corner, where a figure slowly began to form out of the darkness, translucent, trembling, shifting between faces. It was Evan Cross, His voice came through the static, layered and distorted. "You shouldn't have come back," he said again. "He doesn't like when they remember." Lena's breath caught. "Who's he?" The lights burst, plunging them into blackness. The sound of metal chains echoed through the corridor. From the darkness came a deeper voice, guttural, ancient, vibrating the air. "I was born in their guilt. I feed on their stories." Every light flickered on simultaneously, revealing the walls covered in names. Names of inmates, guards, wardens, everyone who had ever died at Redwood. In the center stood the figure of Miles Carter, his face hollow, eyes like burned-out coals. He wasn't attacking, he was pleading. "End it. Burn it. Don't let him wake again." Ryan looked around, trembling. "Who?" Before Carter could answer, the ground shuddered. The prison lights turned crimson. From every cell, shadows poured out like smoke, swirling toward the ceiling. The entity's voice boomed through the halls, deeper than thunder. "You brought him back." Evan's image began to distort, his face twisting in agony before vanishing into the haze. The sound recorder exploded with feedback. Reyes screamed, "Run!" And they did, sprinting through the corridors as doors slammed behind them one after another. They burst into the yard just as the east wing began to collapse. Flames erupted from the windows. No source, no fuel, just spontaneous combustion. Ryan turned back one last time and saw a figure standing in the fire. Not Carter, not Evan, but something else. A shape made of shadow, stretching impossibly tall, watching them leave. They didn't stop until they reached the highway. 2 weeks later, the fire department declared Redwood State Penitentiary unsalvageable. The site was fenced off, slated for demolition. No trace of Carter's cell or the writing on the walls was ever found. But the hard drives, the ones Ryan thought he'd destroyed, mysteriously resurfaced online under a new name, the Dead Man Archive. Each file was tagged with a date. The last one was titled October 31st, 2022. It contained only one frame of video, static, and a faint reflection of someone standing in front of the camera. It was Ryan. His mouth moved, whispering something almost too quiet to hear. But when you amplify the audio, you can make out the words. "It's almost Halloween." And then nothing. The fire at Redwood State Penitentiary was officially ruled an accident. Authorities blamed faulty wiring and an outdated electrical system. Yet every officer, firefighter, and historian who had stepped inside the prison knew the truth didn't fit on a report. The timing alone was enough to make even the most skeptical shiver. 3:13 a.m., the hour that had haunted inmates, guards, and now documentarians for decades. In the chaos of the blaze, every section of the east wing crumbled, metal twisted and concrete shattered. Yet one place remained untouched. Cell 1423. Inside that room, investigators found nothing living. No sign of anyone, no equipment, no debris from the fire that had consumed everything else. Only a cracked mirror leaned against the far wall, and on the floor beneath it, 5 words were etched in fresh, dark ash. "Halloween never ends in here." The sight alone caused a wave of unease. Some claimed that as they stared, their own reflections shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible changes. A hollow-eyed figure in an orange jumpsuit lingered for a second, then vanished. Others reported hearing faint whispers echoing through the ruins, so soft and distorted that they could barely make out the words, but the message was always clear. Someone, or something, wanted to be remembered. Locals in the surrounding hills of Northern California began reporting strange occurrences after the fire. The fog over the ridge seemed heavier, almost sentient, rolling like smoke from an unseen fire. People walking near the old perimeter fences at night claimed they heard footsteps behind them, soft at first, then growing louder. Sometimes, fleeting shadows would dart past, tall, distorted shapes with hollow eyes that disappeared when approached. The story of Redwood's East Wing had not ended. It had evolved into something far more unsettling. Even the footage captured by Ryan, Lena, and Reyes refuses to stay contained. The hard drives, which were thought destroyed, mysteriously resurfaced online under the label The Dead Man Archive. Each file contained fragments of the prison's history, distorted recordings, and unexplained shadows, all timestamped for past and future Halloweens. The last file, ominously dated October 31st, 2022, displayed nothing but a single frame, a reflection of someone standing in front of the camera, watching, whispering, and the voice, unmistakable, haunting, repeated the warning. It's almost Halloween. The chilling truth is that Redwood State Penitentiary, its inmates, and the man known as Miles Carter are no longer confined to brick and mortar. Their presence lingers in the recordings, in the whispers, in the reflections of anyone who dares to look too closely. It is a legacy of fear that cannot be erased by time, fire, or explanation. Some say that anyone who watches these stories, these recordings, invites a part of that darkness into their own world. It is subtle at first, a shadow in the corner of a room, a cold draft on a quiet night, and then it grows until it cannot be ignored. So if you made it this far, be cautious. Check your reflection tonight. Listen closely to the sounds in the quiet. Keep your doors locked, your lights on, and your cameras ready, because some doors, once opened, never truly close. The story of Redwood isn't just a tale of history or horror. It is a warning, a reminder, and, above all, a testament to the fact that the darkest corners of human experience, once stirred, may never rest. If you felt the chill tonight, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and remember, the next shadow is already watching, waiting, and it might be closer than you think. Halloween inside Redwood State Penitentiary may be over, but the terror it left behind has just begun.